This is Big Podcast.
It's the marketing podcast for podcasters. Build a Big Podcast. David Hooper with you. This podcast, all about making a podcast that people care about, something that attracts people, something that's going to get people talking, something that helps people, something that's going to make you money, spread a message, make your mother proud. If you make a podcast, nobody listens to it. Doesn't matter. It's going to help you in that you have to do certain things to make a podcast. You're going to develop those skills. But as far as making an impact on people, making you money, no. You got to have listeners, man. And that's what this podcast is all about. This is the audio edition of my weekly newsletter. That is called Big Podcast Insider. You can get it right now at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Here's what we're talking about. Podcasting lessons from the dog park. Triple your podcast reviews. Quality is in the ears of the listener. Feeling lucky? 20 million podcasts can't be wrong. Also some classified ads, things that I think will help you to grow your podcast, make more impact with your podcast, and make money. The things that this podcast is about. This episode of Build a Big Podcast brought to you by Riverside.fm, a virtual studio that makes recording and editing at the highest quality possible, accessible to anyone. Riverside.fm allows you to create high-quality content with ease. Audio and video, both are locally recorded. You're going to sound like you're in the same room with your guest. And as far as how you look, if you're doing video, up to 4K video resolution. Because you're recording locally, you're going to bypass poor or unstable internet connections. You're going to get studio-quality audio and video. And you'll save hours of work with AI. I'm talking about artificial intelligence. One effortless click to do what are otherwise repetitious and tedious tasks. I'm talking about AI transcription for all your videos. AI speaker views, meaning if you're doing video, when you're speaking, the camera is on you. When your guest is speaking, the camera is on your guest. Magic Clips, they use AI to find the most compelling moments of any content that you got and automatically create short clips with overlay captions for social media. Not just one social media outlet, all of them, customized for each individual outlet. Sound good? Yeah, Riverside sounds good, but you're going to sound even better. I want you to try it out, Riverside.fm. They'll give you a couple of hours to peek behind the curtain, see what's there, and use it for yourself. That should be what? An interview, maybe 2 interviews? Try it, Riverside.fm. Kick the tires, look under the hood. If you want to stick around, this is the discount code. It's going to get you 15% off. Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. That's Riverside.fm. Go there, get a free account. And if you want to stick around, 15% off with the discount code. Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. All right, if you've been here before, you know how it works. I'm going from thing to thing to thing. All of the things that I mentioned before the ad, they're all about podcasting. Everything that I talk about is linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. And to make it easy on you so you know when I'm switching, you're going to hear this sound. Ready? Here we go. Podcasting lessons from the dog park. I first talked about dog training and podcasting in issue 159. This is issue 170, so 11 issues ago. Still thinking about it. I'm working with a dog trainer, and he has taught me as much about myself as the dog. And one of the things that I noticed when I was at the dog park with him last week, it reminded me of something that I see a lot of podcasters do. Have you ever been to a dog park? Stories are legendary. When you go to a dog park, you're basically entering an unsupervised arena where who knows what you're going to find as far as behavior and attitudes. And that's not just the dogs, that is their humans as well. Here's what I know for sure. Most people at dog parks fall into one of 2 categories. 1, completely disconnected. These are the people that are on their phone, chatting it up with somebody. A lot of guys go there to hit on women. Ladies, you know that. I mean, I think this is a thing. I'll get a cute dog and I'll meet ladies at the dog park. Yeah, man. That's where people are making it happen these days. Regardless, though, they are 1, completely disconnected and completely distracted from their dog. Second group, overly attached. That's just the opposite. These are people who are trying to micromanage their dogs. So you've got one group of people with heads in their phones, hitting on other people, not watching their dogs at all. And another group watching every single move their dogs make, not letting their dogs have any leeway and getting nervous about any interaction their dogs are having with other dogs. I see something similar with podcasting. A big chunk of people either worry about making everything 100% perfect or are completely detached from their podcast, basically calling themselves a podcaster without actually doing any of the work that it takes to be one. That second group, the completely detached type, I think it's easy to get into podcasting and not know what you don't know. You think, oh, I'm witty. I'm fun to listen to. You think because you're involved, other people are going to be interested in it. And that's not the case. So we've got a whole generation of podcasters. I call them ramblecasters that turn on their phones or whatever they've got. We used to do it with digital recorders. Dum-da-dum-da-dum, walking around. Hey, man, think I'm going to go shopping. Oh, man, yeah, hot sauce is on sale. Oh, wow, yeah, it's 10 cents off this week. They go on some kind of tangent. It's just crazy. You've probably seen versions of this. A lot of co-hosted podcasts do this. It's a couple people, they're supposed to talk about something, and that's what's in the episode notes, but they get together, turn the recorder on. Oh, hey, man, how you been doing? Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, oh, really? Oh, how the kids? Did okay on exams? Oh, great. Yeah. All right. And then they go on and on and on and on. Hey, that's great. That's great. Build rapport. Warm up those mics. Warm up your throat. But do that stuff before you hit record or edit it out. As I said, don't just assume because you're involved that other people are going to care about it. If you want a great podcast or a well-behaved dog, it takes work. You've got to show up. You've got to care. You can pretend to show up. If you just want to hear yourself talk or connect with someone, by all means, that's great. But that's for you. That's not for a lot of people listening. Maybe it's somebody who knows you, who's interested in you, who has a relationship with you somehow. It's not for the general public. Making something for a big audience or even a niche audience, that is a completely different thing that you cannot be detached from. Like I said, you can pretend to show up. Blah, 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 I'm a podcaster. But you can't pretend to care. You can't pretend to do the work. That's something different. On the flip side of this, you can't be so engaged in making something 100% perfect that you forget to let it breathe. Don't be like those micromanaging dog owners. Following Fido around the dog park, not letting him do his thing, interacting with other dogs, making mistakes, getting in arguments, being playful. Same thing with kids, by the way. Go to the standard park, you'll see parents doing this. Let it breathe. 38 Special, remember them? You know who that is? Not the gun, the band. If you don't know them, look them up. They had some good advice from podcasting from back in 1981. Say, hold on loosely, but don't let go. If you cling too tightly, you're going to lose control. Take that advice. Care, show up, do the work, be invested. If somebody leaves you a review, own it. That hurts. Don't be like, well, that wasn't for you. No, man, that hurts. But it also wasn't for them. Understand that. Find that middle ground. Don't try to micromanage. You ever seen somebody who leaves a bad review? You'll see this on Amazon. And then an author will come in. Oh, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Why don't you get on the call with me and we'll talk it out? You're not trying to win people over either. Admit that it hurts, knock the stink off it, take what the guy was saying, and do better next time. So you are caring, but you're not micromanaging. Like 38 Special says, hold on loosely. Hey, quick note about Big Podcast Amp. That's the audio monetization program. If you like the newsletter, you like the podcast, you are going to love Big Podcast Amp. It's a personal coaching program to help you do three things. 1, grow your podcast audience. 2, get people talking about your podcast. And 3, make more money with your podcast. I've got details at bigpodcast.com/amp. bigpodcast.com/amp, A-M-P. Triple your podcast reviews. A friend of mine swears by this tool. It's a big promise, tripling your podcast reviews. Unless you're getting 0 podcast reviews. Tripling that is still 0. Seriously, it's a pretty good promise, right? Here's what I know for sure. If you want people to review your podcast, and reviews do help when it comes to social proof, you will see sponsors looking at reviews of your podcast to see who they're associating with and get an idea of how many people are engaged with you. You'll find that potential guests are looking at reviews for the exact same reason. We don't have public numbers in podcasting like we have with YouTube. YouTube, 1 billion plays, whatever. Podcasting, you could have 1 billion downloads and I would have no idea. You could have 10 downloads and I'd have no idea, except for the interaction that you've got. They say success leaves footprints. If you're having success, you're probably going to see some reviews. You're probably going to see some interaction, some social media followers. Anyway, reviews, they help. If you want to triple your reviews, this is a tool that may help you. I'm going to break down how it works. I don't think you need this tool, but it may make that job of getting reviews easier for you. Here's what it does. It gives you a short, memorable podcast link to send people to. If you go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com, again, this is issue 170. I have an example of that link that you can click on. This is not something I did with Triple Your Podcast Reviews. It's something that I did with something like Linktree. If you want to copy it, steal it, go ahead, but switch all the information over to your podcast, obviously. Feel free to do that. Again, it's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Issue 170 is where it is. That's what you do first. You create a short and memorable podcast link to send people to. The second thing you do is show people who click on the link only the apps that they already have installed and not a ton of random choices. You will see this on a lot of podcasting sites. They'll say, subscribe to my podcast. They'll have 80 choices of how you can subscribe. Why? That's ego, man. It's not making it easy on people because most people are subscribing to your podcast in one of two ways. If they're on Apple, they're using Apple Podcast. So that's one that you want. If somebody's using an Android device, Spotify. That's the one that I pick. It is arbitrary. Spotify has a lot of Android users. We used to use Google. Google ditched that, man. Google Podcast is gone. YouTube, who knows? Who knows if that's going to work out or not? Do I think that Spotify is a good podcast player? No, but it is an option for people with Android. So I give people those two specific choices. One, Apple Podcast, and two, Spotify. If somebody has something else, one of the 80 other things that I mentioned, those people know how to use an RSS feed. So I give people that third option, an RSS feed. Again, I've got this linked. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue 170. You can go to my link. You can swipe the code, switch out my podcast for yours. It will work for you. So that's number two. Show people who click on the link only the apps they already have installed and not a ton of random choices. Anybody who likes audio has Spotify installed. Anybody who's on an iPhone, you've got Apple Podcast. Number three, give specific instructions on how to leave a review using the app selected. This is something that you can do yourself. Could be a short YouTube video. It could be step 1, step 2, step 3. But you need to let people know how to leave a review. And you need to let them know how to leave a review using the app that they are using to listen to your podcast. So I'd have 2 quick videos, 2 short tutorials, one for Apple Podcast, one for Spotify. Go here, click here. Type the review in here, click submit. Something that simple because people don't know. You might think it's obvious. Well, of course people know that I want them to review me. No, they don't. This is why you go to any restaurant. They say, like us, leave us a review on Yelp. They are dying for reviews. You have to ask for them. You have to solicit them. Sometimes you have to give people a free dessert. You seen this in a restaurant? We'll give you a free dessert if you leave us a review. They want you leaving it right then. Maybe that can help you. Quadruple your podcast reviews. Free dessert with a review. Number 4, let them go directly to the review form. So if you are linking to Apple Podcast, if you are linking to Spotify, take them straight to the review form. Don't expect that they're going to find it. A lot of text on Apple Podcasts, a lot of text on Spotify. Just like any social network, these things are made to distract you. How many times have you been to YouTube? I'm just going to go look up this quick thing. Next thing you know, 15, 20 minutes later, you're watching some crazy video the algorithm is sent to you. That's how Apple works. That's how Spotify works. They're trying to get that time on the app up. I love the concept. And if you're looking for more reviews, you're going to find this tool helpful. I've got it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Again, you can build it yourself. Maybe worth seeing how they do it for a little while. If it works, keep it up. If it doesn't work, build your own. Everything is linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue 170. Quality is in the ears of the listener. I got a couple of big ideas to share with you. I've got everything linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com if you want all of them. Here's number 1. Quality recording is available to everybody these days, not just big, well-funded studios. You heard the ad, Riverside.fm. It sounds like you're in the same room even if you're across the world. It is very easy to get quality audio these days. $60 mic, something like Riverside.fm, you're good to go. Back when I started in radio, you had to have a studio. It wasn't any better than what we've got. In fact, it was worse. We're using magnetic tape. There's hiss. This thing's out of alignment. I mean, it sounded okay. Don't get me wrong. But it sounds nothing like what we've got in our pockets via our phone, and maybe a $60 mic. Quality audio is available to everybody these days, not just big, well-funded companies, which means you better get your content together. Everybody's got the quality audio. You can't fool people now. They expect it. Content matters more than ever, if nothing else, because the listener has choices. Back in the day of broadcast radio, 88 all the way to 107, maybe you'd hit, 20 stations. You got religious stations, you got pop, you've got R&B, maybe a little bit of talk. There's arguably something for everyone, but nobody really wanted that one thing. We just tolerated it. Maybe you got 2 rock stations, 2 R&B stations, 2 urban stations, maybe a country station. These days, you've got unlimited choices. That's why your content has to be so locked in. Number 2, listeners don't care how or where you record your podcast as long as it sounds good and it's helpful. And helpful, you can replace that with as long as it's for them, as long as it makes them feel something. Yeah, they don't care how you record your podcast. Right now, I'm speaking into an Electro Voice RE20. I've got a DBX processor. I've got a Focusrite 4th gen, not 3rd gen, not 2nd gen, a 4th gen 4i4 Scarlett going into a Mac. Who cares? You don't care. You just care that I'm talking about podcasting. Your listeners have something similar. And as far as good audio, here's what he says. He says, clean audio that is good enough. That's the measurement for what you want. I agree with that. We don't want tin can and a string, but it doesn't have to be a Grammy award-winning thing. This audio that I'm recording now, it's okay, It's fine. But if a hardcore audio engineer came in here, you'd find all sorts of problems with it. You, as a podcaster, may be hearing problems with it now, but you can hear me. And it sounds better than 90% of the other podcasts you're listening to. You might be wondering how much does good enough audio cost? I mentioned a $60 microphone, an iPhone. That's going to get you started. I think you can do it with about $300. I mentioned the Focusrite Scarlett. I've got the 4i4 model. The 2i2 model is great if you've only got 2 people. If you've got just you, like I am here, a Focusrite Solo Scarlett is great. The only reason I'm using the 4i4 is it has some routing that I like to use. I've got a different headphone mix. I've got something going to a backup recorder. If you're curious about that, it's the Zoom F3. It's a very easy to use 32-bit float recorder. It's going to make sure everything is backed up, that I don't lose anything. Not unless I happen to lose the main computer and the backup recorder at the same time. Yeah, you can do it for $300. I've got that set up linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com, episode 170. Feeling lucky? Speaking of that backup recorder, if you are not running a backup recorder, especially during important interviews, you are taking a risk of losing a moment in time that you cannot get back. You can always recreate an interview, but you can never get back an important moment. I talked about the Zoom F3. I love it. You also might want to take a look at the brand new H4 model by Zoom. It's got 4 tracks, 32-bit float. It is perfect for remote audio recording, backup recording. It is perfect for your main audio recorder. No need to set gain. A lot of recorders are 16-bit, maybe 24-bit. With 32-bit, you've got so much more data. It's not like 32 is double of 16. It's some kind of trigonometric figure. You have so much. It is very hard to clip. It is very hard to get like low volume audio and not be able to boost it without boosting all the noise around it. So you have this hiss. If you've ever tried to do that, you're not going to have those issues. And this thing is cheap. It's cheap. It's brand new. I would recommend that. The new H4 recorder by Zoom for your backups, or what I'm using, the F3 by Zoom. Before I had the F3, I had something called the F6. That might be overkill for you. It was overkill for me. I'm usually doing 1 or 2 tracks. F3 handles it. That's about $300. I think the new H4 recorder might even be $200. It's cheap. I've got it linked, newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue 170. 20 million podcasts can't be wrong. Dan Meisner analyzed 20 million podcast reviews. Speaking of reviews, you're going to go triple your reviews, and this is what you're likely to get. This is what Dan found. 87% of reviews or ratings, we're going to throw that in there, have 5 stars. Crime Junkie, you heard of it? That had the most, 248,000 reviews. That's a lot. A lot of people listening to Crime Junkie. I don't know how many people are listening to your podcast, but I'm going to tell you, Crime Junkie has more. You're not going to have that many listeners. You're not going to get that many ratings and reviews. But if you do, and you keep these numbers up, 87% will be 5-star ratings. Over 800,000 of the shows analyzed had no ratings. I hope you're not one of them. Usually you will not be if you are asking for reviews and doing what I said earlier, making it easy for people to give you a review by linking directly to where you want that review to be and showing people how to leave a review. If your podcast has at least 4 ratings, you've got more than 50% of all shows. If you've got 11 or more ratings, you've got more than 75% of all shows. Explicit podcasts get more ratings. Why is that? Here's a theory. Explicit podcasts, they're self-selecting. If you don't like explicit podcasts, you're not going to listen to them. And if you do, or you're open to them, the chances are the content of those podcasts is made for you. It is something a little bit more specialized than a general non-explicit podcast. With that said, if you've listened to the show before, you've heard me say words like or mother or son of a or asshole or that gets beeped. Why? Because it's a family show. Why? Because I've got class. No, in all seriousness, when you use words like that, they're going to work for some audiences, but for a general audience, they can also be jarring. They can also take away from your message. I mean, we got the numbers here, 20 million podcasts this guy analyzed, but I'm not sure that adding explicit words into your podcast would help you get more reviews. I think people that are reviewing these podcasts, they simply like the content, and that comes from the topic, the guest, your personality. My advice is to keep it clean if you can. True crime podcasts get the most ratings by far. I've got this article linked and some graphics. You can see the graph. Go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 170. It's crazy. Why is that? Well, let's go back and look at the 248,000 ratings. Crime Junkies. Why? Because people love true crime. People are engaged. They're into it. They are the most likely to leave a review. So yeah, true crime podcasts are getting the most ratings so far. And people don't listen to one. They might listen to 5 or 10 of them. I saw an interesting stat about romance authors. People who are reading romance books read something like 30 romance books a week. These are super fans. True crime is the same way. All of this is worth keeping in mind, especially if you're pursuing reviews as part of your growth and marketing strategy. I've got everything linked, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. The episode is 170. I'm going to say this again. From my experience, reviews are not that difficult to get, but you must let people know how to review your podcast. It's not that obvious for most. Most people can barely download a podcast. That's why radio is still popular. In the United States, people listen to 3 times the broadcast radio that they do podcast. Why? It's easy. Power button, volume knob, tuner knob. That's it. Podcasting, a little more complicated. It's getting easier, and we're doing a good job of educating people, but we've got to do just a little bit more when it comes to getting them to listen to our podcast and also reviewing our podcast. Again, newsletter.bigpodcast.com, episode 170 for the link, the stats, and that graph showing you all the things you need to know about getting more reviews yourself and how the true crime genre is absolutely dominating reviews on Apple Podcasts and also Spotify. Classified ads for you. These are things that will help you to grow your podcast, get more attention for it, attract new listeners, make more money, make your mother proud. Swell AI, it automates the writing process for you. I'm talking about podcast summaries, articles, social posts, and more. You can manage multiple shows in one dashboard, build custom templates for each show. All you've got to do is upload your podcast to Swell AI, and they make that easy. It connects to Google Drive, Dropbox, and Zoom. You can get started for free. I've got the link, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Podpage, join over 25,000 podcasters and automatically create a beautiful listener-friendly podcast site from your RSS feed. It is the simplest way to create a podcast website. You can check it out for free, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Thanks for listening to Build a Big Podcast. When you are ready, here's how I can help you even more. If you want to shortcut building a podcast that people care about, I've got a couple things that are free for you. One of them, Big Podcast Extra. These are short emails to help you build an audience, attract clients, and make money via podcasting. I've also got something called the Podcast Growth Toolkit, the Swiss Army knife of podcasting. If you go to bigpodcast.com, you will see that. You can get it right now. I'm talking about episode templates. I'm talking about ways to clear music. I'm talking about guest templates so you can let guests know what they are getting into, making sure they show up prepared, making sure you get the great audio that your listeners deserve. That is free if you've got a little bit of money, just a little bit. I'm keeping this very reasonable for independent podcasters because I love working with independent podcasters. I want to help you spread your message, and you can do that with me via the audio monetization program. This is personalized coaching for indie podcasters to help you grow your podcast audience, build your authority, brand, and reputation. I will work with you, and we will grow your podcast. We will make a better podcast if you want to make money using the power of your voice, because there's multiple ways to do it, not just podcasting. We will look at that. There's more information on that available for you at bigpodcast.com/amp. If you haven't already subscribed to Build a Big Podcast, let me finish with that. This is how to do it. Go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Do it right now before you forget. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Look how easy I make it on you. Steal this page. Make it easy on your listeners. I've got a link for iPhone, a link for Android, and I've got an RSS feed for you. However you're getting your podcast, not a bajillion choices, just 3. iPhone, Android, RSS feed. Click one of those. You will make sure that you never miss an episode of Build a Big Podcast. I've even got a QR code for you. You can scan that. It takes the podcast from the internet, the cloud, straight to your mobile device. You will never miss an episode. That's all at bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Thank you for listening to Build a Big Podcast. I'm here every week, sometimes multiple times a week, talking about growing your podcast, building a bigger audience, making a podcast that people care about, making money with your podcast. And when you go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe, I will see you on the next episode automatically. See you then.